It was supposed to be just another dinner with my family. Nothing special, nothing dramatic, just a quiet night out at our usual spot. But, as you'll see, it's amazing how one comment can change everything. My sister and I, well, we've always had this complicated relationship. We love each other, sure, but there's always this unspoken competition between us. She's always been the one with everything: looks, confidence, the perfect life. And then there's me, still trying to figure it all out, but that night, I thought I had it all together. I'd spent way too long picking out my outfit, making sure it was something that made me feel good. After all, I had been working on myself lately, gaining confidence I'd never had before. I thought I finally knew who I wasn't, that I could show up, be proud, and own it. And then she laughed. The words stung more than I thought they would, and in that moment, something inside of me snapped. Before we dive deeper, if you're enjoying the story so far, make sure to hit that like button. Comment below telling me where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe. I've got more stories coming your way. Asterisk, the night had started out as any other family dinner. Nothing out of the ordinary. Mom and Dad were already seated at the table when I walked in, and my sister was of course the center of attention, laughing, chatting, and being her usual charming self. I stood there for a moment, adjusting my dress, trying to push away the nervousness bubbling inside me. It wasn't like I wasn't used to this. Growing up, my sister always got the spotlight. She had this effortless confidence, this ability to walk into a room and instantly be the most interesting person in it, and me. Well, I was quieter, always feeling like I was living in her shadow, but tonight felt different. I had made an effort. I'd spent hours picking out this dress, a cute little number I'd finally felt confident enough to wear. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't second-guessing myself. I was excited to show up and just be. I slid into the booth next to my sister, giving her a smile, but she barely noticed. She was too busy chatting up the waiter, laughing at his jokes like she was the star of the show. I'm not going to lie, I felt a little invisible in that moment, but I was determined to hold my ground, to not let the usual dynamic between us get to me. This night was about me feeling good about myself, about wearing this dress and just owning it. Dinner was going fine, until, out of nowhere, she said it. "You really think that dress works on you?" My sister looked me up and down, raising an eyebrow. "It's cute, but, I don't know, it's kind of trying too hard." And then she laughed. I was frozen for a split second. Did she really just say that in front of everyone? I tried to laugh it off. I really did. "Oh, come on. It's just a dress," I said, forcing a smile. But inside, my stomach was turning. The laughter from my sister wasn't just a harmless joke, it felt like a punch to the gut. Everyone at the table joined in, and for a second, I wasn't sure if I was going to cry or explode. Mom chuckled, Dad shrugged, and I could see the smirk on my sister's face. It was like she had gotten her punch in, and that was that. The thing is, I didn't even care about the dress anymore. I cared about what that moment meant. I had spent all this time trying to feel good about myself, and she just shredded that. In a matter of seconds, I could feel the heat rising to my face. I wanted to shout, to say something back, but instead I just took a deep breath. "I'll be right back," I said, my voice almost a whisper. I didn't wait for anyone to respond. I stood up quickly, excusing myself from the table, and walked toward the exit. I didn't know where I was going, I just needed to get out of there. I needed space, time to think. Out in the parking lot, I stood for a moment leaning against my car. The cool evening air didn't do much to calm the storm brewing inside me. I closed my eyes and let out a shaky breath. Why did this hurt so much? Why did her words, her laughter affect me this way? And then it hit me. This wasn't just about a dress. It was about everything. All those years of feeling like I wasn't good enough. All those moments where I stood on the sidelines watching my sister get all the attention. All the times I allowed myself to shrink in the background. But not anymore. I wasn't going to let this go. I grabbed my phone from my bag, opened the app, and paid for the entire dinner. Every single meal, I sat there for a moment, staring at the screen, and a strange feeling washed over me. A mix of pride, relief, and a little bit of disbelief. It wasn't about showing off or making a statement. It was about doing something. For me, something no one could take away from me. I wasn't going to let her or anyone define me anymore. As I sat in my car, staring at the receipt, I realized that tonight was the turning point. The moment everything changed, and, trust me, it wasn't over yet, asterisk. The drive home felt like an eternity. I don't know if it was the heavy silence in the car or the pounding in my chest, but it seemed like the road stretched on and on, never ending. The cool night air seeping in through the slightly cracked window didn't do much to cool the fire that was burning inside me. I could still hear my sister's laugh echoing in my ears, could still feel the weight of her words pressing down on my chest. I kept telling myself that it wasn't a big deal, that I was overreacting. But deep down, I knew it was more than just about a dress, more than just about her sarcastic little comment. It was about everything. The years of competing with her, the silent comparisons, the feeling of always being second. The truth was, I'd spent my whole life trying to measure up, trying to find a place where I could be seen. And it always seemed like she had the world at her feet, while I was left in the background. I reached the end of the street and slowed down, pulling into my driveway. I didn't want to go inside just yet. I couldn't face the questions or the awkward silence. Instead, I sat in the car, staring out the windshield. It was like the world had suddenly gone still, and all I could hear was the pounding of my heart in my ears. I thought about what had just happened. I thought about how, in that one moment, everything I had been working toward, my confidence, my self-worth, had been shattered. My sister's laughter felt like a slap in the face, and I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, in some twisted way, it wasn't just her who had made me feel small. Maybe I had let it happen all along. I was tired of being the person who always smiled through the hurt, who laughed along even when I wanted to cry. I was tired of swallowing my emotions and pretending like everything was fine when it wasn't. And I was definitely tired of trying to live up to an image of perfection. That had never been mine to begin with. I took a deep breath, but it didn't help. The anger still simmered beneath the surface, hot and raw. How many more times would I allow myself to feel this way? How many more times would I let anyone make me feel like I wasn't enough? The weight of all those years of quiet suffering began to sink in, and for the first time I realized something. I was angry not just at my sister, but at myself. I was angry because I had spent so much time measuring my worth based on how others saw me. I had given her that power, and tonight, I was done with it. I could feel my hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. I wasn't going to let this moment define me. I wasn't going to let her words stick with me any longer. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about a stupid dress. It was about reclaiming my sense of self, about standing up for who I was and what I deserved. It was about time I stopped letting people walk all over me, even if it was in small ways. The thought was liberating yet terrifying. How many times had I let others dictate how I should feel? How many times had I put everyone else's opinions above my own? I pulled my phone out of my bag, my fingers moving almost automatically as I opened the payment app. The decision didn't come with any fanfare, no moment of clarity or grand realization. It just felt right. It was an act of defiance, a small victory, a way to take back control. I paid for the entire dinner. As I hit send, a strange sense of satisfaction washed over me. It wasn't about showing off or making some big statement to my family. It was about me. It was about standing up for myself in a way I had never done before. I wasn't going to let anyone make me feel less than I was, not even my sister. I leaned back in my seat, staring at the phone in my hand. For the first time, I felt like I had done something just for me. And that feeling of doing something because I deserved it, of acting on my own terms, was empowering. It was small, but it felt like a huge step in the right direction. Still, part of me couldn't shake the lingering anger. I wasn't sure if I was angry at her or at myself, or maybe both, but I was done with pretending. I was done with letting my sister or anyone else define my worth. I didn't need her approval. I didn't need anyone's approval. I wasn't the same person I was an hour ago. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was in control of my life. I wasn't going to shrink back. I wasn't going to hide. And I wasn't going to let anyone make me feel small anymore. But as I sat there, still in the driver's seat, I realized something else. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. I had no idea where it would lead or what the next step would look like. But I knew that I couldn't go back to the way things were. I couldn't go back to being the quiet, invisible one. I had to keep moving forward, even if I didn't have all the answers. For the first time in a long time, I was ready to find out who I really wasn't. I wasn't going to let anyone get in the way, asterisk. I couldn't shake off the feeling of power I had in that moment, paying for the dinner. Taking control of a situation that had spiraled out of my control for so long, it was like a weight had lifted. And for the first time in a while, I felt like I was doing something for me. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it meant everything. Still, I knew that this wasn't just about the money. It was about proving to myself that I was worth more than just a punchline or a joke. I was worth more than my sister's judgment, and I was worth more than the doubts I had about myself. But as satisfying as it was, I didn't want to go back inside. I didn't want to face the confusion in my family's eyes or listen to the uncomfortable questions. I needed time to process everything, time to think. So, I sat in my car, staring out into the dark street, feeling the cool breeze on my face. Still unsure of what had just happened and what it meant for me. I hadn't planned on running away from the dinner. I hadn't planned on storming off like that, but I couldn't shake the feeling that if I stayed, I would only continue to let my sister let everyone drag me down. I needed a moment to breathe, to clear my head. I needed to figure out what the hell I was doing with my life. And then, my phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. It was my sister. I stared at the screen for a moment before swiping to answer. "Hello, where the hell are you?" Her voice was a mix of concern and annoyance. Mom and Dad are freaking out, and I'm really starting to get pissed off. I took a breath. I just needed some space. Okay, you don't just walk out of dinner without saying anything, especially when it's a big deal. What's going on with you? I could hear the frustration in her voice, but also a bit of confusion. She didn't get it. Not yet. I don't know, I said quietly, the words feeling heavier than I expected. I just couldn't stay there anymore. There was a long silence on the other end. Why? What's wrong? Do you really want to know? I asked, a little sharper than I intended. Because if you do, you might not like what I have to say. She huffed, clearly annoyed, but I could tell something had shifted in her tone. Maybe she was realizing something wasn't just about the dinner. Maybe it was bigger than that. Just tell me, she snapped. But her voice wasn't as harsh as it had been. I paused, unsure of how to even start. You hurt me tonight, I said, my voice quiet but firm. You don't even realize how much, but you did? And I'm tired of pretending like it doesn't matter. The words hung in the air between us. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, but she didn't respond at first. Okay, she finally said, her voice softer now, more thoughtful. I didn't mean to hurt you. I'm sorry. The apology felt almost foreign coming. From her, we didn't really do apologies in our family, not like this, but the fact that she had said it, well, it felt like a small victory. I know you didn't mean it that way, I said, leaning back in my seat, still trying to process everything, but it still hurt, and I've spent too long letting your little comments get to me. I'm not done with it. There was a brief silence before she spoke again, her voice quieter. You've always been so quiet about it? I never knew you felt this way. I felt a tightness in my chest, but I pushed through it, because I never had the courage to say anything. I've always let you think you were the better one, the more confident one. But I've been working on myself, and I'm not that person. Anymore, I'm not going to let you or anyone make me feel small again. There was a long pause on the other end of the phone, and I began to wonder if she had hung up. But then I heard her voice again, much softer than before. I didn't know you felt that way. I'm sorry, really? Her voice was almost apologetic. Now, and for the first time, I felt like she wasn't just apologizing for the sake of it. She was hearing me. She was understanding me. It wasn't a complete resolution. It wasn't like everything was magically fixed. But in that moment, something shifted. I realized that maybe, just maybe, my sister didn't know the full extent of how her words affected me. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the only one carrying a burden I hadn't spoken about. Thanks, I said, my voice steady now. I think I needed to hear that. I'll be home soon, she said. We can talk more when I get there. I hung up, feeling oddly calm. I still had a lot of thoughts swirling in my head, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't completely alone in this. Maybe things weren't as bad as I thought. I sat there for a few minutes longer, trying to process everything, trying to figure out what came next. I had just made a huge step in taking control of my life, but the road ahead wasn't going to be easy. There was still a lot of work to do on myself, on my relationship with my sister, on my relationship with my family, but I had taken the first step, and that was enough for now. Asterisk. The drive back to my parents' house felt surreal. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I wasn't sure if it would change anything between us or if the tension would just return in a few days, but for that moment I felt heard. As I parked in front of the house, I could see the lights still on through the windows. I could hear the distant hum of the TV coming from the living room. There was a strange calm about it all, but I knew I couldn't just slip back into the same old routine, and there was no going back. I sat in the car for a few moments before taking a deep breath and stepping out. My heart was still racing from the emotions of the night, but I knew I had to face whatever came next. When I walked inside, the atmosphere was heavy with unspoken words. My mom and dad were sitting on the couch, their faces mixed with concern and confusion. My sister, though, was nowhere to be found. She had probably gone to her room to give me space, which honestly I appreciated, but I knew the silence wouldn't last long. Mom glanced up at me first. Are you okay? Needed some time to think. Dad didn't say anything right away. He just sat there, his brow furrowed, probably unsure of how to navigate the tension between his two daughters. He was the type of guy who tried to keep the peace, but I could tell this wasn't a situation he knew how to fix. The silence stretched for a few more minutes until I couldn't take it anymore. "I'm sorry I left so abruptly," I said, my voice steady, but I needed to take a step back. I needed some space to think about everything that's been going on. Mom gave me a soft smile, like she understood. "It's okay, honey. We just wanted to make sure you were all right." "I know, Mom," I said. I think I've been carrying a lot of stuff that I never really talked about. Things I didn't know how to say." My dad looked up at me. "What do you mean?" I hesitated for a moment. This wasn't going to be easy, but it was something I had to say, not just to them, but to myself. "I've been feeling invisible," I said quietly, "and tonight, when Sister's name made that comment, it just hit me harder than I thought it would." There was a long pause, and I could feel their eyes on me. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it was raw. Honest. Mom spoke up first. "I didn't know you felt that way. Why didn't you say something before?" I bit my lip. "I don't know. I guess I just thought it was normal, you know? I thought it was just the way things were supposed to be. But I've spent so long comparing myself to her, and it's made me feel like I'm not enough." Dad finally spoke, his voice softer than I expected. "Honey, you are enough. We've always been proud of you, both of you." I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes, but I blinked them away. "And honestly, I don't think that's on you or her. It's on me. I've let it define me for too long." Mom's face softened. "You don't need to be like anyone else. You've always been your own person, and that's something to be proud of." I nodded, my throat tightening. "I'm trying. I'm really trying." Just as I was about to say more, my sister walked into the room. She looked hesitant, like she wasn't sure how to approach the situation. Her face softened when she saw me, and for a brief moment, I saw something in her eyes that wasn't just guilt. It was understanding. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice sincere. "I didn't mean to hurt you tonight. I don't know. I wasn't thinking. I should have been more supportive." I swallowed hard. "It's okay," I said, but I wasn't sure if I was convincing myself more than her. "I just needed you to see me, not as someone to compete with, but as your sister, someone who deserves to be heard." She nodded slowly, almost like she was processing what I said. "I get that, and I'm sorry for not seeing that sooner." There was still a lot to work through. Years of unspoken tension, years of holding back. But in that moment, I felt a shift, not just between me and her, but in myself. Maybe this was the start of something new. Maybe it was time to let go of all the old baggage and move forward, both in my relationship with my sister and in how I saw myself. I looked at my family, feeling a sense of calm I hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe we weren't perfect, but we were getting there. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a place at the table. The next few days felt like a blur. After that conversation with my family, everything seemed to shift. I had no idea if my sister fully understood the depth of what I had said, but something was different. The air between us wasn't as thick, and the tension that had been simmering for years seemed to have softened, just a little. I could tell she was trying, at least. And that was all I needed right now. It wasn't like we were suddenly best friends or anything, but there was an openness now, an unspoken understanding that hadn't been there before. She didn't make as many jabs at me, and when she did, she actually seemed to catch herself before the words left her mouth. It was small, but it was something. As for me, well, I started to feel like I could breathe a little easier. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was constantly fighting to be seen, to be heard. It wasn't just about her. Either it was about me learning to stand up for myself, learning to not shrink away from the things that made me feel vulnerable. I spent the next few days reflecting on everything what had happened at dinner. What I had said to my family and the way my sister had finally acknowledged my feelings. I realized I had spent so much time chasing after approval, after validation, that I had lost sight of who I was and what I truly wanted. I was always comparing myself to her, to everyone else around me, and in doing so, I had neglected to appreciate the things that made me unique. I didn't need to be the loudest person in the room. I didn't need to wear the most expensive clothes or have the most followers on social media. I just needed to be me, and that was enough. I thought back to the dinner, to the moment when I had paid for the entire meal. It hadn't been a petty gesture. It had been a statement. I was taking control of my life, taking control of how I wanted to be seen. It wasn't about showing off or proving anything to anyone. It was about showing myself that I was worth something. I was worthy of respect, of kindness, and of love, not just from my family, but from myself. The more I reflected, the more I realized that paying for the dinner was just the beginning. It wasn't about the money. It was about taking a stand. It was about deciding that I wasn't going to let anyone, including my sister, define my worth. I was going to do that for myself that afternoon. My sister knocked on my door. She had been quieter lately, but today she seemed like she had something she wanted to say. "Hey," she said, her voice a little softer than usual. Can we talk? Motioned for her to sit down and we both sank into the couch. She didn't look at me right away, her hands twisting in her lap, but then she met my gaze, and I saw something different in her eyes. There was no smugness, no superiority, just honesty. I've been thinking about what you said the other night, she began, and I get it now. I didn't really realize how much my behavior affected you. I didn't realize how much I've taken you for granted. I swallowed, trying to keep my emotions in check. It's okay, I said, but my voice cracked. I just even trying so hard to be something I'm not. Trying to be like you, trying to fit into your world. And I don't know why it took me so long to realize that I don't have to. She nodded slowly. I've always tried to be perfect. Always tried to be the one everyone looked up to. But I don't think I've ever really let myself just be. There it was, the breakthrough. It wasn't just me who had been carrying something heavy. My sister, too, had her own struggles, her own insecurities she had never shared. For the first time, we were both seeing each other as more than just rivals. We were two people, struggling in our own ways, trying to figure out who we were in a world that expected us to be something we weren't. I think we've both been playing roles, I said softly. Roles we thought we had to play to fit in. But I don't want to do that anymore. I want to be myself. She smiled, her eyes softening. Me too. It wasn't a perfect conversation and it wasn't a perfect moment. There were still things to work through, still years of unspoken words and hidden frustrations, but something had shifted between us. Something real, something honest. And that was enough for now. I'm glad you called, I said, a weight lifting off my shoulders. I am too, she replied, giving me a small, genuine smile. We're good, right? We're good, I said, nodding. In that moment, I realized that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. That the bond between us wasn't entirely broken, it was just waiting to be healed. And while it might take time, I knew that I was ready to take the next step. I wasn't going to let anyone, especially my sister, hold me back anymore. I was going to live for me, not for anyone else's approval. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but I was ready for it, because for the first time, I truly felt like I was enough. Asterisk. The days after that conversation with my sister were calmer, but not in the way I expected. The tension that had been hanging over us for years seemed to evaporate, replaced by a quiet understanding. We still had moments where we didn't know exactly what to say or how to act around each other, but it felt like we were on the right path. Slowly but surely, we started to rebuild our relationship. One honest conversation at a time. I found myself spending more time with her, something I hadn't done in ages. We'd grab coffee in the mornings, talk about everything and nothing like we used to when we were younger. And while it wasn't always easy, I started to realize that maybe the years of resentment and competition between us weren't as permanent. As I had thought, maybe, just maybe, we could figure this out then. A few days later, something unexpected happened. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, when I heard a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I hesitated for a moment before standing up and opening it. Standing there, holding a bouquet of flowers, was my sister. "Hi," she said, her voice a little nervous, but with a smile that told me this was something important. "I know this might seem kind of random, but I've been thinking, and I wanted to do something for you." I blinked, confused. "What is this for?" She handed me the flowers and looked down, her cheeks flushing slightly. I wanted to say I'm sorry again, and I wanted to show you that I'm trying. I know I've messed up, but I want to be better. I want to be a better sister." I stood there, speechless for a moment, staring at the flowers in my hands. Part of me was shocked. My sister had never done anything like this before. Apologies. Sure. But a gesture like this? It felt like a breakthrough in itself. I don't know what to say, I said quietly, my heart racing. "You don't have to do this." She shrugged, but her smile was sincere. "I know, but I wanted to. Because, honestly, I think you're right. I've been so caught up in myself and my own stuff that I didn't even realize how much I hurt you. And I don't want to keep doing that." I felt a lump form in my throat. This wasn't just about the flowers. It was about her growth, her realization, her willingness to change. I could feel the weight of it, the sincerity in her voice. She was acknowledging everything I had said, and she wasn't just apologizing. She was changing too. I reached out to hug her, and for the first time in what felt like forever, it wasn't awkward. It wasn't forced. It was real. I hugged her tightly, not caring that I was probably crying a little. "I'm sorry too," I whispered, "for keeping everything in for so long, for not speaking up sooner." We pulled away, and she smiled at me again. The tension between us finally gone. "Yeah, me too," she said softly. "But we're here now, right?" I nodded, still holding the flowers in my hands. "Yeah, we are." For the first time, I realized that healing wasn't something that could happen overnight. It wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic moments. It was about the small, everyday steps we took to understand each other better, to forgive, and to move forward. I wasn't sure where this new version of my relationship with my sister would lead, but I felt hopeful. We were on a path that I never thought we'd be on, but it felt good, really good. "I'll put these in water," I said, finally noticing how beautiful the flowers were. "Good idea," she said, stepping back to give me space. "I'll let you get to that. I just wanted you to know I'm trying." "I know," I said with a smile, feeling lighter than I had in a long time. As she walked away, I took a deep breath and looked at the flowers again. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something to fall apart. I felt like I was finally moving forward. The days that followed were a quiet revolution. There were no dramatic moments, no huge breakthroughs, just a slow, steady shift. I started seeing myself differently, not just through the lens of my family or my sister, but through my own eyes. It was almost as if a fog had lifted, and I could finally breathe again. Spending time with my sister had become something I actually looked forward to. We were no longer two people in constant competition trying to outshine one another. We were two women, working through our own issues, but now, with a mutual understanding that we didn't have to be perfect, we didn't have to have it all. Together, we could just be. It wasn't an easy change, but it was real. We still had our moments of friction, but there was an unspoken respect between us now. A willingness to listen and hear each other. And slowly, I realized that the shift wasn't just happening between me and her, it was happening inside me. 2. I started taking better care of myself, not just physically, but emotionally. I had spent so many years chasing approval, comparing myself to others, letting the words of others shape how I saw myself. But now, I was learning to be okay with who I was. I took up yoga, something I had always thought was too out there for me, but it brought me a sense of peace I hadn't known I was missing. I took walks in the park, letting the cool air fill my lungs, focusing on the simple things that made me feel grounded. I found myself smiling more often. Not because I was trying to put on a face for the world, but because I was truly beginning to enjoy life again. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was in a constant battle with myself. I didn't feel like I was pretending to be something I wasn't, just to fit in. One Saturday afternoon, I ran into an old friend from college. We hadn't kept in touch much after graduation, but I remembered her as the kind of person who always seemed to know exactly who she was. Confident, poised, self-assured, everything I had wanted to be, but didn't know how to achieve. We ended up getting coffee, and as we sat there catching up, she told me something that stuck with me. "You know, I always admired you. You were always so real, even when you didn't realize it." I looked at her, taken aback. "Really? Because I've spent so much time feeling like I was never enough." She shook her head. "No, you were always enough. You just didn't see it." Those words hit me harder than I expected. They weren't a revelation to anyone else but me. They were a reminder of something I had always known deep down, but had never allowed myself to believe. I was enough. I had always been enough. I just needed to believe it for myself. It was in that moment, sitting across from an old friend, that I realized how far I had come, how much I had changed. I wasn't the same person I had been a few months ago, sitting at that dinner table letting my sister's words define me. I wasn't the person who needed to shrink back or seek approval. I was finally stepping into the person I was always meant to be. Later that day, I found myself sitting on my porch, watching the sunset, feeling the warmth of the day fade into the cool evening air. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. It wasn't perfect and it wasn't easy, but I had come to a place where I no longer needed to seek validation from anyone else. I was okay with being me, and for the first time, that felt like enough. The next time I saw my sister, we shared a look that said everything without saying a word. She didn't have to apologize anymore, and I didn't have to prove myself. We were just two people, sisters, learning to exist alongside each other in a way that was healthy and true. And as I sat there, letting the moment settle in, I realized that this was just the beginning of living for myself, of stepping into my own light without apology. I wasn't just finding peace with my family, I was finding peace with myself. The following months felt like a new chapter of my life, one I never thought I would get to write. Things with my sister continued to improve. We spent more time together, and our relationship became something deeper, more grounded. There were still moments of tension, of course, but now, we talked about it openly instead of letting it fester. We understood each other better, and in turn, we understood ourselves better, too. But the most surprising part of this journey wasn't just the healing of my relationship with my sister or my family, it was the healing I did within myself. I began to look at myself in a way I hadn't in years, without judgment, without comparison. I wasn't perfect, and I didn't need to be. I was learning to accept myself for who I was, flaws and all. I started to take pride in my little victories, in the small steps that were leading me toward the life I'd always wanted. I embraced my quirks, my quiet moments, and the things that made me unique. I was becoming the woman I had always wanted to be, not the one I thought I was supposed to be. One day, as I was walking through town, I passed the same restaurant where the infamous dinner had taken place. It had been a few months since that night, but the memories came rushing back. I remembered the hurt, the frustration, and the anger that had surged inside me. But now, all I felt was peace. It wasn't just about my sister's comments anymore. It was about how far I'd come, how much I had grown. In that moment, something inside me clicked. It was like all the little pieces of my life that had been scattered around. All the things that had felt like they didn't make sense suddenly came together. I walked into the restaurant, no longer feeling like the person who had stormed out. Months ago, the place hadn't changed much. Still the same familiar faces, the same comforting atmosphere. I smiled as I walked past the staff, heading to the back where the manager was. "Hey," I said, catching his attention. "I'd like to do something." He turned toward me with a puzzled look. "What's up?" "I want to pay for the entire dinner tonight," I said, pulling out my wallet. "For everyone here, on me." His eyebrows raised. "Wait, you want to pay for everyone's meal?" I nodded, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction settle in my chest. "Yeah, I want to leave a little something behind. A bit of kindness, you know." He smiled, clearly surprised but moved. "That's really generous of you." I pulled out my card and handed it to him. As he processed the payment, I couldn't help but smile to myself. It wasn't about showing off or proving something. It wasn't even about the money. It was about full circle. About giving something back to the place that had been a reminder of where I had been and where I was now. As I walked back outside, the sun was setting. I paused for a moment, taking it all in. There were no more doubts, no more second-guessing. I had reclaimed my sense of self. I had reclaimed my power. And, most importantly, I had learned that sometimes the best way to heal is to let go not just of old grudges, but of the person you used to be in order to become the person you're meant to be. I didn't need anyone's validation anymore. Not my sister's, not anyone else's. I had learned to trust myself, to believe in myself, to know that I was enough as I was. And for the first time, I wasn't running away from who I was anymore. I was embracing it. I walked away from the restaurant, a small but meaningful gesture behind me. And, as I looked toward the horizon, I realized that this wasn't just the end of a chapter. It was the beginning of everything that was yet to come. Asterisk.